I don't
What
see
other
them.
Okay.
There they are. Hi, girls. I missed you. Whoopsie.
You're funny.
Here.
Go ahead.
Okay, so in these 9 verses, David said he provides gold, brass, silver, gold, or iron. Sorry. He also says he gives the silver and gold out of his private stash, above and beyond. He also says the princes and captains of Israel give willingly of their own gold, silver, brass, and iron. And of these people, it is said they have a perfect heart.
Mm.
So it seems to be that in God's house, there are those that are their value of the gold and silver and iron, brass, were willingly given. And yet there are also those that had to endure like the fire, whatever that means. Now that could be, my question becomes, is he only talking, in here on earth, or is there a firing process? I've always thought this was you're forever punished for the sins of a temporary life. That's how we were always raised to hear, but here there seems to be value in some things that have endured the fire, which I don't understand what that means. Okay. Next passage, 2 Chronicles 2, 7 through 14. 2 Chronicles 2, verses 7 through 14. Before we read, this is Solomon, who is writing a letter to a neighboring king named Hiram from a place called Tyre that had worked with David in the past. And Solomon is looking for, from this other king, a skillful man to work in gold, silver, brass, and iron. So
Wow.
somebody wants to read that?
Who knew there was this many passages about it? Been to what there?
14.
Send me therefore a man skilled to work in gold and silver, bronze and iron, and in purple, crimson, and blue yarn, and experienced in the art of engraving, to work in Judah and Jerusalem with my skilled workers, whom my father David provided. Send me also cedar, juniper, and algum logs for I know that your servants are skilled in cutting timber there. My servants will work with yours to provide me with plenty of lumber, because the temple I build must be large and magnificent. I will give your servants, the woodsmen who cut the timber, 20,000 cores of ground wheat, 20,000 cores of barley, 20,000 baths of wine, and baths of olive oil. Hiram, king of Tyre, replied by letter to Solomon, because the Lord loves his people, he has made you their king. And Hiram added, praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who made heaven and earth. He has given King David a wise son, endowed with intelligence and discernment, who will build a temple for the Lord and a palace for himself. I'm sending you Huram Abi, a man of great skill, whose mother was from Dan and whose father was from Tyre. He is trained to work in gold and silver, bronze and iron, stone and wood, and with purple and blue and crimson yarn and fine linen. He has experienced kinds of engraving and can execute any design given to him. He will work with your skilled workers and with those of my Lord, David, your father?
Okay, so Hiram responds, the Hiram of Tyre, which is kind of like a country that's just north, a very rich country, but he responds that yes, he will send this guy from he's from part of his mom, what is it, his dad's from Tyre and his mom is from the tribe of Dan, which is a tribe of Israel.
Right.
Mhm.
So it's almost like half
Yeah.
one and half of the other. Now, the interesting thing is, and I just noticed this day as you were reading, there's a ginormous metaphor here where it says in verse 10, we're not going into this, but it says, I will give thy workers timber, of course, wheat, barley, wine, and oil, which all represent spiritual things, which God gives to the workers that work
Hmm.
in his fields. But that in itself is that in itself is a big, metaphor right there that you could spend weeks just studying that verse and see what you come up with.
Hmm.
But
Huh.
Getting back to this, Solomon building the natural temple like Jesus does, the question becomes, why does Solomon ask Hiram of Tyre to send his skilled workers in working with gold, silver, brass, and iron, and also that he's going to send somebody who is of the tribe of Dan and somebody else who's half a Tyre from Tyre? And I began to say, wait a minute, Dan, Tyre, wait a second, and I began to just look up Tyre because a long time ago, I remember reading a lot about Tyre. I just don't remember all of it, but I just looked back the other day, and Tyre represents a rich nation whose heart was lifted up. And if you keep reading in some of the various spots, for instance, in Ezekiel 28 or Isaiah 23, where Tyre is mentioned in great detail, they're described as being perfect until unrighteousness was found within her.
Hmm.
And also, it describes Lucifer, the angel or cherub in the Garden of Eden, who again was perfect until unrighteousness was found within him. So why would Solomon, Jesus, have somebody in that capacity who is from Tyre that seems to start out really good? I'm not saying Hiram did, but he's from a kingdom or whatever that seems to do great work, but eventually becomes prideful, like Lucifer. I mean, that's a big, that's a big red flag, right? I mean, but I wonder why Tyre's mentioned.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Why? Yeah, I mean, and so here's another thing. How about Dan? How about the other half of the worker? Dan, anybody remember who Dan is from or whose son he was?
Was he Ash? No, he wasn't Asher's son, was he?
Actually, he's Asher's brother. Asher's the son of Jacob, wasn't he?
Okay. Yes.
It's son of Jacob.
He was the son of Israel.
Yes,
Jacob.
right. He's the fifth son, but he's also seen as being the black sheep of that particular family.
Oh, really?
Well, and here would be what Jacob said in Genesis 29:17, where he goes through every son of his and gives him an inheritance. He says to Dan, or about Dan, he says, Dan shall be a serpent in the way, an adder, which I think is a snake, in the path, that biteth the horse's heel, so that her rider falleth backwards.
So backslides. So Dan's a bad guy.
Dan
He's
is
a bad guy, I tell you.
right, and so he's the son, and ironically, he's the son that is removed in Revelation. If you look to Revelation 7, which we don't have to do, but you'll see all the tribes of Israel, and you'll see that Joseph, remember Joseph of many colors, he had two sons, Manasseh, and there was one other guy. I don't
To
remember.
Ephraim? No.
Yes, 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 thank you. And they're inherited as sons by Jacob in Genesis. So
Mhm.
he's got his 12 kids, and then he's got two more, so he's got like 14 there. But in Revelation, Dan's name is left off of the inheriting tribe in Revelation 7.
Hmm.
So the question becomes, why? And so I just, again, there's not enough hours to follow every tangent that the Bible presents. It's hard, but in Judges 17 and 18, Dan is mentioned as having fallen into idolatry. So, and of course, Jacob, said things that he was going to be the one that's going to cause the rider, whoever that represents, to fall backwards. So he's got a very negative impact in some form or fashion. So I get back to, why
Yeah.
does Tyre and Dan, are they the one that works on the silver and gold on the temple, the natural temple, which is a metaphor for the spiritual temple? Is a good question, and I don't know. But it does make you scratch your head, because one thing we see about Tyre, she starts off with great promise and then fades away, or Tyre does. Like, well, I'm going to say Lucifer. Lucifer is described as being of Tyre, or he goes into describing Tyre as Lucifer, which is odd in itself, why God would use those two names when all the other good names of the family line of Jacob, seemingly, that did do right, why he wouldn't use them. So there's a reason why.
Irony, or is it just irony, or is it something else,
No, it's got to have a purpose.
It's
This
purpose.
It always has a purpose.
This isn't where, and I could be mistaken. This isn't where like God knocks down the temple and he's like, I don't need to live in one spot, is it?
You mean with Solomon's temple?
Yeah. Or is that that's another temple?
I
No,
think,
that's that temple, isn't it?
yeah, I
That was
think,
destroyed.
yeah, I think it's ultimately destroyed. Some point, I don't remember exactly where, maybe
And it was carried off, I thought, by the Babylonians, but maybe not.
it probably was, because I don't think the Babylonians, in the time frame, you had David, you had his son, and then his son morphed off into idolatry too, and then so did all his neighboring, not all of them, but a lot of the sons of sons of sons. Some of them were good, a lot of them were bad, till eventually God said, I've had enough.
Hmm.
And then
It's just ironic to me that doesn't Solomon meet God? God gives him, I'm going to give you a gift, anything you choose, and he chooses knowledge, right?
Wisdom.
He chooses wisdom, right? That's what it is. And then he dies and not a believer of God, that he worships idols. I don't understand.
Well, he had like 700 wives. He
had wives from
yeah, like 700.
bad country. What was the country next to him that he had a wife from, the wives from, that he shouldn't have taken?
Is it
I don't
Egypt?
remember. Egypt, maybe? Yeah. I don't know. I just don't get it. If God gave you wisdom and God gave you a gift and you met God and God gave you the gift, then what the heck? You should have enough wisdom not to be doing. Sorry, I go off. I apologize.
Yeah, the
That's
whole thing doesn't make sense. It's as if he creates something that he knows is intentionally going to go wayward, and then it's destroyed, and then something is rebuilt and it's a little better, but then it goes like it falls off track, maybe in some form or fashion. But let's again, there's no black and white answer here, so let's just continue on with the next occurrence of the four metals, and that's in Isaiah 60. So there'll be like 3 verses here well, 4 verses actually. In particular, this is a passage which starts off about arise, shine, for thy light is come. But let's read verses 1 through 3, and then we'll jump to verse 17.
Wait, I'm sorry. Um, does everybody remember that song we used to sing in Lighthouse?
What is it?
Arise, shine, for your light is come. Remember that one?
Yeah,
The glory of the Lord is
Yeah.
risen.
No,
My
I don't
goodness.
remember that. That's funny.
Okay, now back to what verses?
1 through
One.
3,
1 through 3.
and then 17.
Okay. I'll read. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. See, darkness covers the earth, and thick darkness is over the peoples, but the Lord rises upon you, and his glory appears over you. Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn.
Okay, and then 17.
Instead of bronze, I will bring you gold and silver in place of iron. Instead of wood, I will bring you bronze and iron in place of stone. I will make peace your governor and well-being your ruler. That's confusing.
So
Please.
again, looking at this, to say the first 2 verses, it could be, Jesus being, his ministry and him coming in 2000 years ago. But I think verse 3, the nations shall come to thy light and kings to the brightness of thy rising, is something we see or will see at his second coming. At least that's how I see the first 3 verses, because obviously thy light has come and thy light came, but it seemed like he started something out and then it's sort of put on pause or allowed to sort of seemingly fade into very little. But there comes a point where, because it talks in verse 2 is now 2. Verse 2, behold, darkness covers the earth and great or gross darkness the peoples. That's now. I mean, you could say that's back before Jesus, but it's certainly now too.
It is absolutely now. Yeah.
So does Jesus' second coming, and again, I feel like it's probably Jesus's first coming, and this second verse covers both periods of time. And the third verse, I think the brightness of his rising, I think, refers to his second coming, where he comes with authority and power. But in 17, it said, for brass I will bring gold, iron I will bring silver, wood I will bring brass, and for stones, iron. So it seems the lesser metals are moved up. Seems like the silver and gold are valued that aren't mentioned here, but I mean, they're mentioned, but the brass moves up to 1 and the iron moves up to 2.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but he's replacing them.
Where's the gold?
Gold is in bronze. Instead of bronze, I'll bring you gold. Instead of silver, and silver in place of iron. So the bronze and iron are being replaced by gold and silver respectively.
Right, so their value is increased substantially when Jesus comes the second time.
Right.
I think this is what I'm seeing in this that's hidden here. But I wonder where the gold and silver are. Are they gold and silver like with him as at his second coming? Or like is his second coming just make those that are the lesser stronger, with the lesser of value, they become gold too? You understand? Like, and so there's still going to be gold and silver, but now that number 3 is now bumped into the first category and 2 is now bumped into silver category.
Yeah, I get you now.
Who are they?
Well, I'm guessing they would be his people in some regard.
But what makes them like different? Like what makes somebody gold? Or is it somebody? Like that's what we're thinking. It's people.
Well, one of the things that I think in one of the other passages we read was David said those that willingly give up their gold, silver, iron, and brass were considered like perfect because they did it willingly. Maybe they didn't need the fire to come, they did it before Solomon started building, or before maybe they did it first willingly, where maybe these people, it took the second coming of Christ, I'm
Oh.
wondering,
Mm.
to
Yeah.
cause them to begin to shine, because maybe they didn't have a level of faith. I'm not really sure.
Or some of the people, or some of, like, they had to go through like just continuous fire to
To make
become,
them, to make them more pure, maybe.
yeah, yeah.
It could be. So what exactly is that? And so. Did you have some-
I just have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a reason why, am I saying this wrong, or does it sound like he's raising them up a level?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So,
Like the first should be last and the last should be first.
right, but like the people who started as, silver are now gold, and the people who were bronze are now silver, and the iron, like all of these people, whatever
Are
he's
pro-
doing, it's like he's raising them
Promoting them.
up to the next level.
Yeah, promoting them. Yeah.
right. And how, I'm not really sure, but they're a metaphor for his people. And they're a metaphor with how God uses, or Jesus, who's the builder of, who's preparing a place for us, is making us. But I guess the thought seems to be, you can be, how are we, well, the question is, how are we an enemy of him? And he still puts us through a fire and we're value. Is that only on earth? Or is there a process that we're still seeing a value in his eyes? And is the fire only here, or is it elsewhere, and he still uses us in his kingdom? I just don't know.
Like we would still go to hell like Lucifer.
Well, I'm not, I don't know.
Scary face.
Like,
Or
I don't know. I'm not trying to say something. I'm just trying to understand the metaphor of what does it mean to be an enemy of God and go through the fire after he burns the city down, and he still uses us in the building of his temple, versus those that gave their life willingly, that came with Joshua to Jericho, and he rescued us like Rahab, or to be one of those people that came with them. You
Yeah.
understand?
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the metaphor here.
I wonder if that's why like they get a like how what is it, the Catholics say there's that in between. I wonder if like
Purgatory?
they pick, huh?
Purgatory?
Yeah, I don't know anything about it, but I know that, but yeah, but that.
It could be. I don't know. I tell you what, the older I get,
The more
That's-
questions, yeah.
What
Less you
said,
know.
man,
Yeah.
yeah. What did you say? Like, man, I sure hope there is, because the older you get, and you're like, man, I'm just, I don't know how you could measure up. Let's hope there's, if tomorrow was my last day, is
Right.
God gonna say, oh, dude, you were like a piece of wood. Sorry, I had to burn you up."
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
be a stone.
I'm like a
Or maybe
splinter
I'd be
in his foot.
Rahab.
A splinter.
Rahab was listed in the lineage of Jesus, though, Dee Dee.
Oh, well, then I certainly wouldn't be Rahab. Yeah, I would be a splinter too.
There's two other places that this is mentioned. Daniel 5, and I don't want to go into too much detail because we'll eventually get to this, but Daniel 5,
We turning there or no?
yeah, might as well, because there's two verses. And also in verse 23. Now, this is going to be another, it's not a dream, but it's an issue where
Vision?
it's where Daniel's at a like almost like a big banquet. It's a
Oh.
next ruler after Nebuchadnezzar. I think his name is Belshazzar, not
Yeah.
Belteshazzar, but Belshazzar. And Daniel's there, and they're sitting there drinking the wine. And read verse 4 and then 23 too.
Is this in chapter 5?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so verse 4, as they drank the wine, they praised the gods of gold and silver, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone.
The gods, what gods? Sorry.
And then 23 said,
Yes.
instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven. You had the goblets from his temple brought to you, and you and your nobles, your wives, and your concubines drank wine from them. You praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which cannot see or hear or understand. But you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways.
So God here begins the process of judging Babylon, but notice these metals were from his house that had been in Jerusalem that had been hijacked by Babylon. So they were brought to Babylon, these things of value, and eventually come judgment time, they're seemingly still in Babylon. Okay, now how do I know that? Well, because if you, and I'll just read this, but real quick in Revelation 18, in describing, of course, Babylon, it says they merchandise of silver, of gold, of precious stone, fine silver, purple, silk, wood, ivory, wood, brass, iron, and marble. So here they're listed in Babylon in Revelation. Now, what happens to the harlot in Revelation ultimately? Anyone know? Because there's seemingly, according to this passage and the Daniel passage, there's gold, there's silver, there's bronze, and there's iron that's in the harlot of Babylon in both locations, that God seems to say, you're still valuable, but maybe you have to go through the fire, and then I pluck you off the floor of the fire and use you in the building of my temple. But what happens to the harlot in Revelation 18 or maybe 19?
Isn't she slain by the beast?
Yeah, what ultimately happens to her? Anybody remember? She's burned with fire.
Oh, no.
Oh,
So
Does she live? No.
she represents the wayward religious system. Okay.
That's right.
So when Jesus, the stone, comes and destroys the statue, the religious system that has built over years seemingly is destroyed. And then he comes and his kingdom gets bigger and bigger. But is there still things of value that are going to go in and seemingly be on the battlefield after the harlot is burned? Some of these examples say, yeah,
maybe, yeah.
they do. They suggest it. And again, I don't know what it means, but it's just, if anything, it gives you a little more hope to say,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
I'm probably, like I said, a splinter, or might be a marble. Marble. I'm not,
You just roll and roll and roll and roll.
yeah. So getting to go full circle, back to Daniel 2. One of the symbolic things that I say to myself is it could be the kingdoms of the earth, Nebuchadnezzar and the Medes and Greece and then Rome and then whatever the mixture is, or it could be representative of the spiritual statue that God says, yeah, I'm going to let you guys have it. But believe me, my son's coming, and there'll come a time where he's going to destroy you completely with no trace. But as a metaphor, maybe there's little things that are left on the battlefield that God said, well, there's a little piece of gold there. It's been through the fire. That I do wonder if that's suggested in these passages.
That's hopeful.
I don't know.
I
I can only
know.
feel that that's the case.
Anybody see anything else? Because I don't see any other interpretation for one. It's probably one of these two, but God always, he does what he wants and explains what he wants. See anything else it could be?
Yeah, I don't know.
I just keep coming back to it. It has to be the church, the wayward church. It's not following the Bible and praying to God. There's gods, there's the universe. You know how they say, oh, I'm going to pray to the universe. Like, shut up.
Do
Like,
you
all
think
of that-
like when you said gods too, I was thinking I feel like I've read multiple times where there's like where it says gods and it'll say like, but that God didn't hear, that God doesn't listen. And I'm like, do you think that's just because like the Bible was written by, but I mean, I know the Bible is God's word, but like, do you think it's like, I don't know, like, I'm like, wouldn't he say like there is no God? Like, I don't know, like no other God. I know he says there is no other God, but I'm always curious, like, is there really, like, is there really, like, could it be like like spiritually? I don't know. Obviously my mind's going like so many different ways. I'm not good at explaining stuff.
Do you mean a lesser gods? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Like, cause I read that in the Bible and I'm like, he doesn't just say like, no, like he'll say stuff, like there'll be stuff in there that'll say like gods
Yeah,
or these gods. And I'm like, what does that mean?
like
I thought they were descriptions of the other nations around Israel and who they worshipped.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like they created their own
Yeah,
God. They just created them, like men created them. And it's just like today, Megan, anything that you hold above the true God can be considered a
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
And so they did they created statues, they bowed down to them and everything. They actually did that. There are
Yeah.
Christians that do that now that we don't even know about, I'm
Right.
sure. It always, when I read it, it always makes God very angry and he punishes
Yeah. No,
them.
yeah. And like I always like think of that like physical, but whenever I'm reading it, like I'm always thinking like he always says like I'm the God, or not, maybe I'm just like not thinking of a correct example, but he'll say like I'm the God of all gods or like something like that. And I'm like, well, who
oh,
who
like I'm the
other
God
gods?
above other gods, all other
Yeah,
gods,
like, and I'm like, who are these?
the
I
man-made
don't know. But
gods.
I know, but one thing I do know is like I feel like God is so much bigger than what we see. So I feel like there's so much like unknown.
Mhm,
Agree.
Great.
true.
We don't know anything.
Turn to Dan, one last verse, Daniel 2:44. And there's like 5 minutes left. So this is the verse that I feel like stood out in just having read what all we just read. Somebody wants to read that?
34.
2:44.
Oh.
You want to read, Megs?
No, you can go. I didn't have it.
In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever.
Okay, so in the days of those kings, the other kingdoms, whatever they might be, if they're physical, God sets up his kingdom. And I believe he set it up and it's set there now, but he waits, seemingly it's to a time to, to destroy the other one, to really place it in firm view. But getting back to the dream, it says he's setting up his kingdom, and it shall, well, where does it say? No shall the sovereignty not be left to another people. So to me, when we're talking about this dream, these passages like this don't refer to an earthly kingdom, they refer to a spiritual kingdom that God has turned over to the Babylonian mindset that man has taken and run with it. That's how I see it, but I feel like God is, like you're saying, Meg, is so big, he takes this dream with multiple interpretations. But I feel like it's spiritual, but I also feel it's probably also representative of the other kingdoms too. But God's not in competition with physical Babylon or the United States or Russia. He's not. He
Or
does,
China, yeah.
yeah. And his kingdom is spiritual, not natural. So at some point he comes and he breaks what we, what everything. I don't know how he does it.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
But I think the process has already started. I just don't think it's anything like what we're used to. I think it's going to
Right.
be, it could take hundreds of years. It could go slowly and who knows, but so does the image, I have one last question. I don't know if we've talked about it. Yes, we did. It says, does the image remain once Babylon is replaced? Is there a body? I think,
Yeah, you asked about that.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I don't know.
Who knows?
Wait, well, I missed that. What? Say that again?
I think earlier, I think Don, we were talking about, God says he sets, in this verse, he says he sets up a kingdom in the days of those 4 kingdoms or 5 kingdoms in the statue. He's setting it up in the midst. Well, in theory, Jesus wouldn't have come until the Roman Empire, which would have been the iron.
Right.
And Jesus, then that would be like 2,000 years ago, and now we'd be probably the feet.
Okay.
So in theory, there's another thing you could say, well, maybe it's the physical kingdoms, but he didn't come until the lower legs. Jesus didn't show up till the lower legs. So is he speaking naturally or spiritually? You understand how deep
Yeah.
this is? It's really deep. And once you get down to it, you sort of say, God, why did you have Dan and Tyre? Like, this is what I wondered. And we have a minute, real quick. The first time God comes in the Old Testament, he brings and he sets up his kingdom on earth. But he does it through the law and you have to obey. The second time he comes and he gives us more. He gives us his son who we don't deserve, versus the first time around, I don't think we could even live up to the old covenant, could we?
Mm-mm.
No.
way.
So now he comes and he stacks the deck on our behalf, and still man has managed to build what we say is to be God's kingdom on the earth. And he comes and he says, okay, wait till my son, really shows up like the light that comes in that passage in Isaiah, that all nations will come to his rising. Yes, he's set his kingdom up, but he hasn't seemingly risen very far on the horizon. And
It
someday,
just makes you wonder why he wants us, our souls or whatever, if we're such idiots.
we
Do you
are.
know